WBSX, the cyberbully, broadcasting to you from the land of eternal white boy summer, where there are Jim Crow laws for all black pillars.
You may even get tired of winning, and you'll say, please, please, it's too much winning. We can't take it anymore. Mr. President, it's too much. And I'll say, no, it isn't. We have to keep winning. We have to win more. We're going to win more.
Good Patreon morning, Patriots. It is Thursday, and the Labe has returned. How are you guys doing this fine, beautiful Thursday morning? I'm nearing the end of my day. Had a rather productive overnight work session. And Tobias in the chat, Guten Tag. Guten Tag to you, sir. We had there was a Rammstein song that played in the pre-show. And I was like, I hear German. Where's Tobias? And he appeared. He appeared immediately when summoned. You too need to have a German who pops into the chat every time you summon him. Dave Johnson, what is that I see?
Welcome to the Gulag. If you survive, you earn your freedom.
5 gifted subs from the man, Dave Johnson. He got my wife's alt. He got Florida Girl. He got Glorious Lighthouse. He got 7%er and Isaac. Thank you, Dave Johnson. Patriot, it's good to see you this morning.
You know, Dave Johnson is the gayest person to ever walk this green earth.
Here is the biggest, gayest man in the world.
Wow. So gay. So gay. Okay.
Dave is the first addition to the nice list. Mrs. Kingpill is keeping track of the nice list in the chat. Dave is the first addition to the list this morning. Pale Morning Dude also sent some kicks, and hold on, pushing buttons here. Slosher, more German.
Going to bed for night shift. Catch the replay. Have a good stream.
Another night shift man. Thank you, Slosher. Appreciate you, buddy. Also, Duffhead, thank you, sir, for renewing your subscription. I do believe the tip link is working again. As Slosher's tip coming through proved, it is working again, for now at least. So the usual constraints apply if you're going through Ko-fi. You can't have any non-alphanumeric characters, including spaces, in the name. And then the message has to be under 250 characters. So if you follow those two constraints, then it's supposed to work. But I do think I got that fixed. Dave missed his message. Well, you know what, Dave?
You know, Dave Johnson is the gayest person to ever walk this green earth.
Here is the biggest, gayest man in the world.
So gay.
We've always got time to celebrate the gayness of the gayest man in the world, Dave Johnson. Thank you, sir. I appreciate you. Adjut Prop Master is in the chat, our great propagandist, and he just shot over a preview. We have a ASTROLABE preview, and I just opened that up. So let me get it set up here, and we are going to watch a quick preview. Make sure you guys show up this Saturday for the Saturday edition of the ASTROLABE. It's going to be, this one is going to have to be another evening one. That may wind up being how we do it. We just stick with the evening ASTROLABEs on Saturday, or like late afternoon. This one, because of working around Pascha schedule and everything, it'll have to be then, because I'm going to be getting up then and doing the ASTROLABE, and then we're going to head over to church for Pascha. So, yes, but now what we have is a preview. He doesn't even say anything with it. It's a mystery. I don't even know what we're going to get here. Let's go. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
I said, come on, baby, turn the lights off. Ooh, 'cause it's getting late. I said, ooh,
Yes!
I know you're gonna try to hang tough.
Tremendous!
You shouldn't hesitate.
Oh, I'm gonna chimp! Oh, that's fantastic. Christ is King and soon to be risen. If that's not gonna get you to show up on Saturday, man, I don't know what will. Phenomenal. Banger, sir. Do you want to tell everyone what the feature presentation is going to be for this week? I don't know if that was a hint or not, or if it's going to be something else. Here, I'll drop the link to that one in the Kingpill Discord right now, and you guys can grab it there, and it'll also be on the Substack afterwards after I post the episode when we're done here. Yes, the movie this Saturday is going to be Gone in 60 Seconds, another classic. So make sure you guys show up for that. If you've never experienced a ASTROLABE before, they're a lot of fun. We got a feature presentation, sometimes more than one. In this case, it'll be one feature presentation with commercial breaks. And those commercial breaks are can be basically anything. Some of it's original content. Some of it is some of the biggest banger clips sourced from the internet for the week. All sorts of good stuff. So make sure you guys show up for that. It'll be probably around 5 p.m. or so Central Time on Saturday. Okay. Another little musical number here. Every time this comes across the timeline, I feel obligated to play it. Halo and Breaking Benjamin is some of the rawest 2000s aura to ever grace Western society, and the fact that kids these days grew up with current Halo instead of this makes me sick to my stomach. Young'uns, you have no idea.
Sir, permission to leave the station.
For what purpose, Master Chief?
To give the Covenant back their bomb.
Permission granted.
Just one question. What if you miss?
I won't.
Oh, yeah!
Boo.
Only the strong as will survive. Lead me to heaven when we die. I am a shadow on the road.
Coming soon to Karg Island. Speaking of, better than the Lego movie, the Iran pilot rescue. This is the way that we experience news these days. And, news and entertainment have become kind of all one thing. The timeline updates every day and some new news/entertainment piece drops. I'm here for this.
God is good. He's alive. Go get our boy. One American behind enemy lines. Wounded. Surrounded. We bring him home.
Viper 1-2. Hang in there. We're coming.
Hang in there, Patriot! No such thing as fiction.
Coming in danger close. Keep your heads down.
Colonel, let's go home.
Package secure. Heading to extract.
He descended into the bowels of hell on Good Friday and then was raised up again on Sunday. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Dan Kane here had a few more things to mention about the operation, and there's a particular clip in here that I want to make sure that we get.
The United States has devastated the regime's ability to harm Americans and our interests for years to come. Since the beginning of major combat operations, the United States Joint Force has struck more than 13,000 targets, including in that 13,000, more than 4,000 dynamic targets that popped up on the battlefield and were immediately addressed, thanks to the exceptional command and control system and intelligence, acumen, and agility of our Joint Force. CENTCOM forces destroyed approximately 80% of Iran's air defense systems, striking more than 1,500 air defense targets, more than 450 ballistic missile storage facilities, 800 one-way attack drones storage facilities. All of these systems are gone. We've devastated Iran's command and control and logistical networks, destroying more than 2,000 command and control nodes and degrading their ability to target U.S. and friendly forces.
You know, unless they're just straight up lying about all of this stuff, there is no possible way to frame it up as anything other than Iran has been significantly set back militarily. Diplomatically is a separate question, and the politics is the real game here. But militarily, the only way that you could make the case that, unless you're just going to straight up say they're just lying, they're just making it up. It's just totally fake, just fake numbers altogether. Which, okay, go ahead and make that case to me. But that's a pretty high bar to clear, I think. The only other way that you could do that would be to say that Iran had built up such an immense military capacity that you could not then also make the claim that this has no bearing on American national security. Like, you got to make one case. You got to either say, yes, it did have a bearing on American national security, and Iran has just such a massive remaining stock of military personnel and supplies, ballistic missiles, everything else, that they're like, maybe not now because they're set back, but like still, you got to tie yourself into all sorts of knots to come away with any sort of conclusion that's like, Iran has not been militarily devastated. Sure, they still retain some capacity. They aren't literally reduced to the Stone Age. But I don't see how you can get around the conclusion that they have been thoroughly militarily devastated. They're not reporting all the casualties. Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like the level of devastation that has been done to Iran militarily in as short of a period of time as it's happened. U.S. casualties on an objective military analytical, like if you were to game this out, you would expect that this level of Iranian military devastation could have only come at the cost of like several hundred times the casualties that the U.S. has taken. So maybe several thousand times of the reported numbers. Somewhere in there. So there's like, you could say they're not reporting all the casualties, which I know, Chud Delivery Guy, you're being sarcastic. People have made that case, and I'm like, okay, sure. Maybe the casualties are substantially higher. They've got a fucking gigantic margin higher that they could go, given what they've accomplished. And if you want to have this like libertarian thing about like, oh, they're taking advantage of them and sacrificing their lives and what, now we're into like a fundamental like, does the United States have the right to use its military? Now we're like arguing that there's something illegitimate about the use of the United States military. You could debate whether or not it is a matter of national security, but you can't say to someone who believes that it is a matter of national security that it's an illegitimate use of the military. You've got to retain the debate on, is it actually a matter of national security? Which gets you back around to, they've been this militarily struck, and yet they still retain some sort of great capacity to stare the United States down, in which you're arguing against the premise that they aren't a concern of national security. So I've been reasoning myself around and around and around, trying to get into the minds of these people, trying to treat them with good faith. And it's just not possible. The only other conclusion is they're profoundly ignorant.
It is, and we know this, incredibly frustrating right now to be a lower level Iranian commander trying to fight your fight.
Here's the other thing. I can't remember who it was that made this point I was just listening to, but yeah, all the cases that are made for why a ground invasion would be extraordinarily difficult, how densely mountainous, how much rough terrain, how spread out, how large the country is. Those are also reasons why the Iranians have, like, not only has their active military equipment been hammered, but their supply lines and their production facilities have also been devastated, and they can't quickly resupply themselves either. The fact that the terrain is as rough as it is a hindrance to Iran's capacity to rapidly resupply themselves.
Secretary said the Iranian Navy now lies mostly at the bottom of the Arabian Gulf, and we assess that we've sunk more than 90% of their regular fleet, including all of the major surface combatants, as the Secretary said. 150 ships are at the bottom of the ocean, and half of the IRGC Navy's small attack boats. Joint fires protected from the land, sea, and air executed more than 700 strikes against naval mine targets, and we had assessed that we destroyed more than 95% of their naval mines. And perhaps most importantly, we've destroyed Iran's defense industrial base, their ability to reconstitute those capabilities for years to come.
Like, it's one thing to destroy the extant equipment, the whether it's boats in the Navy, whether it's missile launchers, whatever it is, whatever the actual equipment that is already out. It's one thing to destroy that. Then there's destroying the stores and the reserves. Then there's destroying the capacity to resupply. All of those things have been massively hit. Iran is substantially weakened now.
We attacked, along with our partners, approximately 90% of their weapons factories. Every factory that produced Shahed one-way attack drones was struck. Every factory that produces the guidance systems that go into those drones was struck. Their missile defense industrial base is shattered, with more than 80% of their missile facilities gone, as well as their solid rocket motor production capability. It will take years for Iran to rebuild any major surface combatants, as more than 20 naval production and fabrication facilities have been damaged or destroyed, and nearly 80% of Iran's nuclear industrial base was hit, further degrading their attempts to attain a nuclear weapon. Throughout Operation Epic Fury, our joint force struck at the heart of Iran's ability to project power and threaten the United States and the region. And in order to do this, it required the service and sacrifice of more than 50,000 American warfighters deployed across CENTCOM, EUCOM, and stateside.
Josh Ham says every dude I know who actually did war isn't talking like the Panikins. Yeah, the guys who actually have personal experience with him, I haven't seen a single one who doesn't recognize, and even the ones who are like, I don't like the war, they're like, you gotta kind of admit it was pretty fucking badass. And as Chud Delivery Guy says, all the objectives Trump communicated on day one have been met. They've been going down the list. He want to say, oh, he's lied into war, like they don't know what they're doing, they don't have a plan, they don't know what, like. He went up directly, day one, said, here are our objectives, here's about how long it's going to take. And they've been steadily checking off their objectives that he stated on day one, and it's taken about that long. Just merely having a national security apparatus that engages that directly is pretty profound. It's just like, yeah, this is what we're going to do. This is what we did. Okay. I can take that. That's a good thing. I like that.
The Joint Force flew more than 10,000 missions, including 62 bomber missions, 18 of which flew round trip from the United States to deliver bombs on military targets. Each of these missions was more than 30 hours in duration, and we did that 18 times. No other military in the world can do that. And it's a testament to the logistical force that quietly serves behind them. I cannot thank TRANSCOM and the Air Force Tanker and Mobility Force more. Combined with Army and Navy joint fires, we stuck more than 13,000 targets. And along with our Gulf partners, we've thus far intercepted 1,700 ballistic missiles and one-way attack drones, defending our forces and our partners in the civilian population. And we remain ready to do so should the need arise. Along the way, we consume more than 6 million meals, and by my estimate, more than 950,000 gallons of coffee, 2 million energy drinks, and a lot of nicotine, but I am not saying that we have a problem.
That's a lot of nicotine. That is a lot of caffeine. We know exactly what the U.S. Armed Forces runs on. 6 million meals does seem a bit high. That's true. Just so you know, for a citizen and for anyone else, one thing that I've realized helps sometimes with Kick is if you have other apps that you've had open, like YouTube or Spotify or anything else that plays audio or plays video, you can, if you close those out, like force quit them or close them out, then I've found that the Kick app tends to run more stably. It's the case with my phone. Yeah, I'm not using the YouTube app. Okay, so the CIA used a secret tool called Ghost Murmur to find the airmen in Iran. Ghost Murmur pairs long-range quantum magnetometry sensors with AI to find human heartbeats. See, I kind of... This is another one of those things where, like, there's no such thing as fiction. Narrative is more important than facts. Even if this isn't true, even if this is just made up, even if this is say a cover for remote viewing capacity or whatever, the remote viewing projects, whatever it is, they could be totally bullshitting this. But after they pulled off what they did, having this story come out, just like what happened with Venezuela, they go in, they yoink Maduro, and the guys are like talking like they saw aliens. And then we found out they got discombobulated. So they got discombobulated. Now they're using they're using long-range quantum magnetometry sensors to find human heartbeats. They did this to find one of their own guys. What if they're looking for you? Now they can use long-range quantum magnetometry, and they can find your heartbeat, identify where you are from dozens of miles away. See, this is just like totally feeds into this belief that, you know, like the standard narrative is United States has their military capacity has waned and really gotten bogged down and corrupt and all that sort of thing. And then there's like the counter to that, which is, no, actually the shit that they have is like this. You don't want to fuck with them because they've got all these new like space age weapons now. This is fantastic national propaganda. The CIA used a futuristic new tool called Ghost Murmur. The secret technology uses long-range quantum magnetometry to find the electromagnetic signal of a human heartbeat and pairs the data with artificial intelligence software to isolate the signature from background noise. It was the tool's first use in the field by the spy agency. I guarantee that's not true. And was alluded to Monday afternoon by President Trump and CIA Director John Ratcliffe. It's like hearing a voice in a stadium, except the stadium is 1,000 square miles of desert, a source briefed on the program told the Post. In the right conditions, if your heart is beating, we will find you. Holy shit. If your heart is beating, we will find you. Now, in the right conditions, there's probably carrying a lot of weight. But this source and another with knowledge of Lockheed Martin intelligence collection tools told the Post that Ghost Murmur was developed by Skunkworks, the aerospace giant's secretive advanced development division. The company declined to comment. The technology has been successfully tested on Black Hawk helicopters for potential future use on F-35 fighter jets. They're going to be putting heartbeat sensors on F-35s. The missing and wounded weapons systems officer, known publicly only as Dude 44 Bravo, was hiding in a mountain crevice after his F-15 jet was shot down late last week. Looks like this is the area where they were at. The relatively barren landscape made for an ideal first operational use of Ghost Murmur. The name is deliberate. Murmur is a clinical term for a heart rhythm. Ghost refers to finding someone who, for all practical purposes, has disappeared. And there was a little bit more here. It was about as clean an environment as you could ask for because of low electromagnetic interference, almost no competing human signatures, and at night, the thermal contrast between a living body and the desert floor, which gave operators a secondary confirmation layer. Normally, the signal is so weak that it can only be measured in a hospital setting with sensors pressed nearly against the chest. But advances in a field known as quantum magnetometry, specifically sensors built around microscopic defects in synthetic diamonds, have apparently made it possible to detect these signals at dramatically greater distances. The capability is not omniscient. It works best in remote, low-clutter environments and requires significant processing time. It was unclear to the Post sources how long the processing time was in this use. It's also unclear if the technology may have had additional wartime offensive uses. And then a pivotal moment in the mission came when Ghost Murmur detected the aviator, with the first source describing the two technologies as both being useful, the other one being the Boeing-made Combat Survivor Evader Locator Beacon. He had to come out of the crevice to send the beacon, the first source said. It was less important the signal they sent and more important that he had to come out to send it. Trump and Ratcliffe hinted at the new technology while briefing the press on the dramatic mission, which included hundreds of U.S. troops and 2 rescue planes getting stuck in a field, requiring more planes and the destruction of the stranded jets, with no American casualties. Trump told the press that the CIA spotted the missing American from 40 miles away, though it was unclear if he was referring to the tool's initial detection distance or subsequent observations, or if the president's citation was precise. He also talked about he was talking about like a visual confirmation, like they saw his head and they watched his head for 45 minutes and then his head moved. So I think they had some sort of visual dealio that they were using. It's like finding a needle in a haystack, finding this pilot, and the CIA was unbelievable, Trump said. The CIA was very responsible for finding this little speck. The president joked that the technology might be classified, in which case I'd have to put him in jail if he talks about it, and I don't want to put him in jail. He doesn't deserve that. Talking about John Ratcliffe. Trump himself has revealed the contours of secret new technologies, including telling the Post in January that he deployed a weapon called the discombobulator to disable Venezuelan defenses during the January 3 raid. The secret nature of Ghost Murmur was, quote, basically why everyone's been so cagey about how the airman was actually found. I don't think people even know this technology is possible from this distance, according to the first source. So that's a fun one. Now, what I got here? A couple comments here. Now, obviously, the whole war crime. I think anybody who's listening to the Labe is aware of how war crimes is fake and gay. Like a war crime is just something that a winner uses to prosecute a loser for extra reasons, and lately it's been a thing that is invoked to constrain. It's invoked by libs to constrain people they don't like. So when Trump said a whole civilization will die tonight, never to be brought back again, I don't want that to happen, and it probably will. However, now that we have complete and total regime change, where different, smarter, and less radicalized minds prevail, maybe something revolutionary wonderful can happen. Who knows? We'll find out tonight, one of the most important moments in the long and complex history of the world. 47 years of extortion, corruption, and death will finally end. God bless the great people of Iran. And Piers Morgan says, this is a brazen pre-admission of genocide against the Iranian people, which would obviously be a war crime. Madness! So I've got a couple of things here, just within the frame of the whole war crime thing. Retaliation against infrastructure that would otherwise be protected under Geneva Conventions is permitted in retaliation for other violations. Attacking shipping in the Strait of Hormuz is a war crime. Launching cluster missiles at civilian population centers is a war crime. Launching drone swarms at Dubai hotels is a war crime. Financing Hezbollah is a war crime. It is absolutely legal under the law of war to retaliate for Iran's atrocities by targeting bridges and power plants. They were warned of what the red line was and of what the consequence would be if they crossed them. Additionally, this is the most important part, no foreign tribunal has jurisdiction over the actions of the U.S. military. The only authority that can assess whether Americans committed war crimes are American courts. So an appeal to war crimes is an appeal to the American judiciary. And then Dr. Brian L. Cox here is quote tweeting Iran State TV openly admits that they intend on using human shields. Tomorrow at 2 p.m., we will create human circles around the country's power plants. And Dr. Brian L. Cox here says this is one major problem with routinely distorting the language of international law to advance a preferred socio-political agenda and or push pure propaganda. Conduct that isn't a war crime, like the Minab school strike, is widely denounced as one anyway, while conduct that actually is a war crime, goes overlooked and is largely ignored. This development illustrates that point perfectly well. As I and many others have persistently pointed out, attacking civilian infrastructure such as power stations that also serve a military function is not automatically a war crime. If there is truly no military utility, then it is. Same if the expected incidental harm is excessive in relation to the concrete and direct military advantage anticipated. Imagine subjecting the prosecution of a war to judges. It's just, the entire premise is completely insane. But even within that frame, it's still bullshit. But to conclusively make that determination, we need access to information regarding knowledge and intent of personnel responsible for each attack. Unfortunately, that doesn't stop pundits and activists and academics and, well, Democrats in Congress, particularly noticeable since Operation Epicure got underway, from denouncing basically anything as a war crime on the basis of a non-doctrinal, effects-based analysis, often built on pure speculation or double hearsay from anonymous sources reported in the news media. Then, there are actual war crimes being committed right in front of our faces, and nothing. No one notices or even thinks to point it out, like Iran State TV announcing a plan to create human circles around the country's power plants. Although Iran hasn't ratified AP1 or the Rome Statute at the International Criminal Court, it's uncontroversial to conclude the prohibition against using civilians to shield military objectives from attack, from the first source, or from military operations in both sources, reflected in the text of each treaty, is binding as a matter of custom. In fact, this is an actual war crime established in the Rome Statute. So while the US and Israel are widely falsely accused of committing potential war crimes for directing attacks against civilian infrastructure that isn't, Iran announcing a plan to commit actual war crimes won't make headline news or warrant even a peep from most or all of the Democrats in Congress. So that was kind of the gist of it. Just that the actual, like, recruiting people to go surround military targets, declared military targets, having civilians go surround them with their bodies to use them as human shields, within the war crime frame would absolutely be a war crime. Yes, Josh Ham, Department of War has war plans to invade The Hague if they ever try to go after American service members. It's literally a statute within U.S. law that if The Hague goes after any American service members, the Pentagon will invade. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about Machiavelli here. We have lots of Machiavelli appreciators around these here parts. But I don't know. A lot of these Machiavelli appreciators don't really like to see actual Machiavellian practice. James E. Thorne here says, food for thought. In The Prince, Machiavelli teaches that a ruler's first duty is to secure the state, even if that means speaking and acting in ways that shock polite society. He warns that men in general judge more from appearances than from reality, and that a successful prince must be judged on the effects of his words, not on whether they conform to genteel norms. Trump's recent language toward the Iranian regime is not a lapse of self-control. It is a calculated act of deterrence aimed squarely at the leaders of a state-sponsored terrorist apparatus. He is negotiating through intimidation, signaling resolve, ruthlessness, and a willingness either to send Iran back to the Stone Ages or to ensure that a whole civilization will die tonight, in terms that pierce the bubble of diplomatic euphemism and force the IRGC command to reassess its risk tolerance. In that sense, Trump is acting far closer to Machiavelli's prince than to a modern liberal statesman. He is willing to appear vulgar, even unhinged, if doing so strengthens the fear of his threats in the minds of his adversary. What is striking is not that a leader dealing with such a regime would use this language, but that so many in the West seem genuinely unable or unwilling to recognize the strategy. They clutch their pearls about tone while ignoring the basic logic of coercive diplomacy. When you want to stop a hostile regime and its terrorist proxies from further escalation, you must shape their expectations, not placate your own commentariat. Machiavelli's blunt counsel is that a prince must sometimes speak as both, quote, man and beast, combining law with the language of force to protect his people. One is left wondering whether our political and media classes have forgotten the oldest lessons of statecraft. Has no one read The Prince? Well, you see, no one has read The Prince, and those who have, for some reason, they seem to opt out of the recognition of this worldview when the subject of Trump arises. Just strange phenomenon. Obviously, you guys know at this point, this is the trouble of taking a day off in the middle of the week. Some news happened. The Iranian state was not wiped off the face of the map, as anybody could have told you was going to be the case. It was obviously not going to be wiped off the face of the map. I think it was Michael Knowles actually has had some really good commentary on this. He pointed out that when Trump sent that tweet on Easter, the one that has Tucker Carlson just completely relieving his senses over, when he said, open the fucking strait, you crazy bastards, praise be to Allah. Michael Knowles pointed out that what Trump was doing was explicitly mirroring the way that the Iranian leadership talks. When they talk about the great, death to the great Satan, and they speak in this really elaborate, dramatic, ornate, very, very apocalyptic language, he was just mirroring their language. And the fact that praise be to Allah was in there was what revealed that he was doing a bit. My president was posting. He was doing a bit. Praise be to Allah. He's like, listen, you motherfuckers, I am going to squish your head like a melon. Perhaps you ought to cooperate. So Iran has cried uncle, despite the fact that so many ostensible Americans want to convince you that Iran's actually winning and that they are just poor, innocent victims here. It's a literal pirate state that exists to constrain global trade, to prey upon global trade, and introduce chaos into the system selectively. That's the purpose of the Iranian state. They're not some poor, innocent, there's a difference between the Iranian state and the Iranian people. And unfortunately, in the land of geopolitics, when you're dealing state to state, there are casualties. That just happens. It's unavoidable. Yes, it would be nice if there were none. There should be as few as possible. Yeah, the Barbary Pirates. It's literally the Barbary Pirates redux. Just scaled way, way up. So, for some reason, a bunch of people want to suddenly treat the United States as the unhinged aggressor here, and just refuse to recognize the massive, massive damage that Iranian military infrastructure has taken and the economic pressure that they are under. And we're going to talk here in just a minute. A report came out, very interesting, describing the splits happening between the IRGC and the civilian government. We're also going to read the New York Times article about the behind-the-scenes stuff from Maggie Haberman, talking about the behind-the-scenes of how the Iran war began. Jay Kirk over on Rumble, he has appeared again with a $50 tip. Thank you, my man. He says, can we just go ahead and make Trump Augustus, please? I even said please. You know, I think he's going to make himself. He's just steaming his way straight forward. Just going to make himself. Thank you, man. I appreciate you. I'll get that added to the tip goal here when I get a chance. So, Amy, can you, what are we at? We're at 64.88 right now. Remind me of that later when I go to change it. So the Iranian National Security Council announced April 7th, we have achieved a great victory and forced the United States to accept our 10-point proposal. Strange. Like the exact same thing that the people who have been badged the retard right, the exact same thing that they've been saying. Oh yeah, great victory for Iran, forcing the United States to accept their 10-point proposal so that they would not glass our entire nation. This guy says, this is in Arabic, translated from Arabic. There's an old Russian joke that goes like this. In 15th century Russia, under the Mongol occupation, a peasant and his wife were walking along a dusty rural road. A Mongol warrior stopped his horse when he saw them and said to the peasant, I am going to grape your wife right now. But since the ground is so full of dust, I want you to hold my balls while you stand beside me so they don't get dirty. After the Mongol finished his deed and rode off on his horse, the peasant suddenly burst out laughing and started jumping for joy. His wife asked him in astonishment, how can you jump for joy after he graped me so beautifully, or so brutally? The peasant replied, laughing, I got one over on him. I didn't hold his balls. Now his balls are full of dust. Exactly. You got cocked. Well, no, I got dust on my balls. So let me run through the quick sequence of events here. I'm not going to go really deep into all the detail on here because it's very fluid and there's other interesting stuff that I want to fill the time with. But just a quick update on the sequence. So this was on April 7th. This is 5:47 p.m. So a couple hours before the deadline. Trump says, based on conversations with Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif and Field Marshal Asim Munir of Pakistan, and wherein they requested that I hold off the destructive force being sent tonight to Iran, and subject to the Islamic Republic of Iran agreeing to the complete, immediate, and safe opening of the Strait of Hormuz, I agree to suspend the bombing and attack of Iran for a period of 2 weeks. This will be a double-sided ceasefire. The reason for doing so is that we have already met and exceeded all military objectives, and are very far along with a definitive agreement concerning long-term peace with Iran and peace in the Middle East. We received a 10-point proposal from Iran, this is very important, we'll get to this in a moment, and believe it is a workable basis on which to negotiate. So, we have a 10-point proposal, we're like, not great, but you know what, we can work with that. That's what this means, a workable basis on which to negotiate. All right, you know, we got a ways to go, but yeah, that's worth a ceasefire, because we've already accomplished our military objectives. Now it's just a matter of establishing some sort of a stable regime, pressuring, cornering them into establishing some sort of stable regime, a la Delcy Rodriguez in Venezuela, and then mission accomplished. Continues, almost all of the various points of past contention have been agreed to between the United States and Iran, but a 2-week period will allow the agreement to be finalized and consummated. So, almost all of the points of past contention have been agreed to already. This is what he's saying. He's saying that almost everything has already been agreed on. There's a few things we still need to nail down, but a 2-week period will allow that agreement to be finalized and consummated. On behalf of the United States of America as president, and also representing the countries of the Middle East, it is an honor to have this long-term problem close to resolution. Thank you for your attention in this matter, President Donald J. Trump. Interesting, he says that he's on behalf of the United States of America as president, and then also as a representative of the countries of the Middle East. Remember I said that this is not no longer just a bilateral thing between the United States and Iran. This is now everyone in the region is all getting involved to have some say-so in how things go. And then this was Iran's official statement. So Iran says, this is the Foreign Affairs Minister Aragachi. He says, on behalf of the Islamic Republic of Iran, I express the gratitude and appreciation for my dear brothers, I think this is probably His Eminence, Prime Minister of Pakistan Sharif, and His Eminence Field Marshal Munir, for their tireless efforts to end the war in the region. In response to the brotherly request of PM Sharif in his tweet, and considering the request by the U.S. for negotiations based on its 15-point proposal, as well as announcement by POTUS about acceptance of the general framework of Iran's 10-point proposal as a basis for negotiations, I hereby declare on behalf of Iran's Supreme National Security Council. So there's three things here. So the brotherly request of the Prime Minister of Pakistan, the request by the U.S. for negotiations based on its 15-point proposal, as well as the announcement by POTUS about acceptance of the general framework of Iran's 10-point proposal. Those are the three things. On that basis, I declare on behalf of Iran's Supreme National Security Council, if attacks against Iran are halted, our powerful armed forces will cease their defensive operations. For a period of 2 weeks, safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz will be possible via coordination with Iran's armed forces and with due consideration of technical limitations. So, the language in Iran's statement is full of all sorts of squirrely. There's all sorts of squirrely language in here. So, if attacks are halted, then we'll stop. For a period of 2 weeks, safe passage will be possible via coordination and with due consideration of technical limitations. So, it was kind of like a tentative sort of a ceasefire. Was it agreed on? Was it not agreed on? Agreed on with whom? That's going to become a very relevant question. So the next morning, Trump said, the United States will work closely with Iran, which we have determined has gone through what will be a very productive regime change. He's said this multiple times now. He has said they believe Iran has gone through a regime change. Now he's saying it's very productive. So they're saying there's someone who they're talking to, or they're negotiating with now, that they are propping up, they're intending to prop up as the leadership. But I think you can see in the subtext here that there are different factions operating within Iran, and some of them are working with the Trump administration. Some of them are not, and that's probably a pretty fluid situation. There will be no enrichment of uranium, which is one of the points that was on Iran's 10-point list, is that they would be able to continue doing enrichment of uranium. There will be no enrichment of uranium, and the United States will, working with Iran, dig up and remove all of the deeply buried B-2 bombers' nuclear dust. It is now and has been under very exacting satellite surveillance. Space Force. Nothing has been touched from the date of attack. We are and will be talking tariff and sanctions relief with Iran. Many of the 15 points have already been agreed to. Thank you for your attention in this matter, President Donald J. Trump. So, the United States have their 15-point list, and Trump is saying many of the 15 points have already been agreed to. He's talking about taking not just tariffs away, but actually removing sanctions from Iran as well. So we're talking about the framework for reintegrating Iran into polite society. And part of the agreement that he's at least saying they've already agreed to, it wouldn't surprise me if they've discussed this with certain people within Iran, is that there will be a collaborative effort between the United States and Iran to remove the nuclear material. The United States isn't going to go in and forcibly remove it. There's going to be a collaborative effort between the two to remove it. Now, has it already been removed and this whole thing would be for show? Who knows? I don't think so, but I don't know so. Just a thought that pops into my head. So this whole thing has turned into a CF, which is part of why I don't want to just go through like the whole list of all the different points and everything, because there's not even an agreement on which list is the list. And this has become its own sort of a story that I'm sure many things are going to change even between. I'm sure something's going to change while I'm here doing the lab. And then before tomorrow's episode, there'll be some kind of an update. But J.D. Vance was asked about this. He's been in Hungary meeting with Viktor Orban, which is very interesting timing. And he was asked about this list. And it turns out that there's 3 separate 10-point lists, supposedly from Iran. There's 3 separate 10-point lists. And this goes to the same thing that we're going to get to this article here in just a minute, talking about the fragmenting leadership within Iran.
About Iran, sir. So let me just say, given you guys are going to ask about Iran, let me just say a few things, actually. So, number one, I think it's very important for the American media to be honest with the American people on this particular issue, because it affects not just, the normal issues of public policy. It actually affects peace and war. And here's what I mean. So in the past couple of days, I've seen a lot of reporting from the American media about the 10-point proposal that the Iranians have made. Now, as I know, because I've been involved in this, there are 3 different 10-point proposals, at least, that I've seen floating around. The first 10-point proposal was something that was submitted, and we think, frankly, was probably written by ChatGPT, that was submitted to Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner. That immediately went in the garbage and was rejected. There was a second 10-point proposal.
And Caroline Leavitt said the exact same thing, that the first 10-point proposal was totally preposterous, not even remotely worth consideration, and she used the same language, which is thrown in the trash. He's saying they think it was made by ChatGPT. So somebody who's kind of half-assing it is like, oh, hey, let's make a deal. Here's this proposal. And they're like, what? No. So that 10-point proposal, that initial one, is not the one that Trump was referring to.
Proposal that was much more reasonable, that was based on some back and forth between us, between the Pakistanis and that is the 10-point proposal that the president was referencing in his truth yesterday.
Now, I think he said North Koreans, Pakistanis and North Koreans. The clip kind of broke up there, but obviously North Korea and Iran have been more or less allies, or at least, partners in crime, so to speak, for a while. But look at all the different nations that are now being pulled in and all having a stake in what happens here.
And then, frankly, I've seen a third 10-point proposal that's even more maximalist than the first 10-point proposal that's been floating around various social media channels. Now, here's what's interesting about all this.
Okay, so there's 3. There was the initial one, which they said was made by ChatGPT, was given to Kushner and Witkoff, and they were like, no, screw this, threw it away. There was a second one. That one, they're like, this is quite reasonable. This is a place that we can negotiate from. We've already agreed on most of this. It's down to a few points that we need to hammer out. That's the one Trump referred to. Separately, the United States has their 15-point proposal, and so as part of these negotiations, they're condensing that down. And then there's a third one that's just been floating around that's even more absurd than the first one.
This is that I've seen various organs, the New York Times, CNN, others, pick up and run the original 10-point proposal based on little more than a random Yahoo in Iran submitting it to public access television in the country of Iran, and then them saying that somehow represents the negotiating position of the government. It's the equivalent of somebody in, let's say, a Democratic councilman in Boise, Idaho, saying something crazy, the local public access TV picking up that crazy.
Okay, so that's the end of the clip, but you get the idea. The administration is this is not the first time now. There seems to be an escalating war happening between the Trump cabinet, or the core leadership of the Trump administration, and the press, and specifically some of the organs like CNN, New York Times, some of the key regime mouthpiece ones that they are. There was the thing they talked about where when the guy went down, that someone leaked out of the Pentagon that there was more than one guy that was missing, and that they'd gotten one, but the other one was still out there. And they said that they were going to be pursuing them legally on that basis. Now, in this case here, Trump talking about, he put out a couple of statements about this. He says, no one can believe that fake news CNN put out a knowingly false and dangerous statement pretending it came from the upper levels of the Iranian government. It didn't. So we're getting a little bit more here. That initial proposal that they were like, nope, this is stupid, threw it in the trash, came from someone else who's not actually part of what they're considering the upper levels of the Iranian government. So already now, this is about as solid of confirmation as you're going to get, that there are different factions within Iran that are all vying for power. And they're either trying to advance peace or trying to scuttle peace. It did not come from the upper levels of the Iranian government. It was totally made up and posted as a headline for a purpose of perhaps inflaming a very delicate situation. It was a new troublemaking site from Nigeria. And CNN just got caught cheating, a very dangerous thing to do. And then he followed it up with, I believe this was, this was also yesterday. He said numerous agreements, lists, and letters are being sent out by people that have absolutely nothing to do with the USA-Iran negotiation. In many cases, they are total fraudsters, charlatans, and worse. They will be rapidly exposed after our federal investigation is completed. So there's a federal investigation ongoing now regarding this, which is interesting. What sort of federal is this? Like the FCC investigating? Is this investigating leaks from within the government? Be interesting to see. There is only one group of meaningful points that are acceptable to the United States, and we will be discussing them behind closed doors during these negotiations. These are the points that are the basis on which we agreed to a ceasefire. It is something that is reasonable and can easily be dispensed with. It's very much like fake news CNN last night headlining a source that had no power or authority to write a letter claiming great authority. And then he said the failing New York Times and fake news CNN each reported a totally fake 10-point plan on the Iran negotiations, which was meant to discredit the people involved in the peace process. All 10 points were a made-up hoax. Evil losers make America great again. Now, amusingly, this was the tweet that Aragachi referenced from the Pakistani Prime Minister. He tweeted, diplomatic efforts for peaceful settlement of the ongoing war in the Middle East are progressing steadily, strongly, and powerfully with the potential to lead to substantive results in the near future. To allow diplomacy to run its course, I earnestly request President Trump to extend the deadline for 2 weeks. Pakistan, in all sincerity, requests the Iranian brothers to open Strait of Hormuz for a corresponding period of 2 weeks as a goodwill gesture. So this was not, when he made his tweet here, he said, do it as a goodwill gesture, not as a conditional thing. Do it as a goodwill gesture. We also urge all warring parties to observe a ceasefire everywhere for 2 weeks to allow diplomacy to achieve conclusive termination of war in the interest of long-term peace and stability in the region. And then he tagged Trump, Vance, Rubio, Witkoff, SE Peace Missions. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, Presidential Envoy for Peace Missions. Then Pezeshkian, the Iranian president, Ghalibaf, the head of parliament, and then Aragachi, the foreign minister. This tweet that was sent out April 7th, that was included by Aragachi as one of the reasons why he agreed to the ceasefire, was initially tweeted with draft Pakistan's PM message on X at the top of it. Ryan Grimm says, this is unbelievable. The edit history on this tweet shows that Pakistan Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif originally copied and pasted everything he was sent, including draft Pakistan PM message on X. Now, obviously, Sharif's own staff don't call him Pakistan's prime minister. They would just call him prime minister. The US and Israel, of course, would call him Pakistan's PM. Would be funny if the fate of the world wasn't hanging in the balance. So, someone, probably not Pakistan, wrote a message, sent it to whoever's running the account for the Prime Minister of Pakistan, and they copied and pasted it and tweeted it without removing the thing from it. So there's some real geopolitical maneuvering happening behind the scenes. Then yesterday, so what happened shortly after this is Israel is pissed about the ceasefire. The Israeli opposition in the Israeli government has said that this is like a massive black eye for Netanyahu, that Israel was not consulted on the ceasefire negotiations at all. They've been imposed on them. He hasn't gotten anything that he promised. This has been a massive failure. And Netanyahu's hold on power is growing ever more tenuous. This is assuming he's even alive still. Who knows if he is? But it's very interesting that the way that this Iranian war has been conducted, leaving aside the question of whether the United States chose to do it or were leveraged into doing it, the way that it's been prosecuted thus far has had the effect of hanging Benjamin Netanyahu out to dry. So Israel went and unleashed a massive attack on Lebanon, one of the most deadly attacks they've done so far. And Iran's Speaker of the Parliament, Ghalibaf, releases a statement claiming that 3 clauses of their 10-point proposal have been violated by the U.S. and Israel. Parliament Speaker Ghalibaf says, first, the first clause of the 10-point proposal has been violated regarding a ceasefire in Lebanon. Now, what's interesting is, in the 10-point proposal, the second 10-point proposal, the actual one that Trump was referring to, this was not the first clause. It was one of the clauses, but it was not the first clause. The first clause said nothing about Lebanon. Second, the entry of a drone into Iranian airspace was a clear violation of the clause, prohibiting any further violation of Iran's airspace. Third, the U.S.'s denial of Iran's right to enrichment is a violation, which was included in the 6th clause of the framework. This is one of the points upon which they were negotiating. Now, the very, quote, workable basis on which to negotiate has been openly and clearly violated even before the negotiations began, he says. I'll remind you that temperamentally, the Persians are, let's say, of a sort with their Semitic neighbors. They love to find loopholes. They love to find technicalities. That's not to say that what's happening in Lebanon isn't abhorrent, but it's also interesting that suddenly now Iran is like, no. What's happening to us needs to be bound up together with what's happening to Lebanon. Because for the longest time, Iran's been like, no, it has nothing to do with us. What's that? Hamas, Hezbollah, any of that? No. That's not us. What are you talking about? These are not Iranian proxies. Now suddenly it's like, no, our fate is bound together with Lebanon's. So he said, the deep historical distrust we hold toward the United States stems from its repeated violations on all forms of commitments, a pattern that has regrettably been repeated once again. As the President of the United States has clearly stated in his truth, the Islamic Republic of Iran's 10-point proposal is a, quote, workable basis on which to negotiate, and the main framework for these talks. However, 3 clauses of this proposal have been violated so far. The proposal is put forth as a basis upon which to negotiate. That doesn't mean that the proposal has been agreed to. So, violating one of the clauses or any of the clauses of it is not a violation of the terms, because the terms haven't been agreed to yet. So this is some real Jewish shit going on here with the coming up with clever loopholes in contracts. Non-compliance with the first clause of the 10-point proposal regarding the ceasefire in Lebanon, a commitment that Prime Minister Shahbaz Sharif has also explicitly referred to and declared as, quote, an immediate ceasefire everywhere, including Lebanon and other regions, effective immediately. Number 2, the entry of an intruding drone into Iran airspace, which was destroyed in the city of Lar in Fars province, in clear violation of the clause prohibiting any further violation of Iran airspace. And 3, denial of Iran's right to enrichment, which was included in the 6th clause of the framework. Now, the very workable basis on which to negotiate has been openly and clearly violated even before the negotiations began. In such situation, a bilateral ceasefire or negotiations is unreasonable. So, the situation continues, but this is what I really want to get to. This is the fun stuff here. Published on Tuesday morning, the morning of the deadline, from Iran International English, which is London, UK, is the location. The world's leading news network on Iran follows for fearless journalism, first-hand reports, and accurate, in-depth coverage. I wonder who they're following. Okay, I'll just Iran International related outlets. So, they published this. A deepening rift at the top of the Islamic Republic has spilled into an unusually sharp confrontation, with President Masoud Pezeshkian accusing senior guards commanders, that'd be the IRGC commanders, of unilateral actions that have wrecked ceasefire prospects and pushed Iran toward disaster. Now, you guys in the King Pill Discord know that the other day after I finished the show and I was laying down trying to sleep, I saw this article and I chimped out. This needs to be taken with a extreme amount of salt, because salted to taste, because this is extremely priors confirming. It's priors confirming to the point that it makes me suspicious. Someone's trying to confirm my priors for me. And I don't know how I feel about it. Iran's president says Guards commanders are wrecking ceasefire chances. We'll read this article. And then the next thing we're going to read after this, we've also got something about it sounds like the Ayatollah, the new Ayatollah, the gay Ayatollah, may have had a change of heart. And I know Seth Levy, The Reckoning on X, I've quoted him on the show here before. I know that he's had a thesis for a while that Trump has been negotiating or working in collaboration essentially with Mojtaba for a while. And then we're going to read the New York Times article about this. So please do tip your streamer, folks. Tips.kingpill.com. Yeah, I'll get the tip goal updated soon, but the link should work. A deepening rift at the top of the Islamic Republic has spilled into an unusually sharp confrontation, with President Masoud Pezeshkian accusing senior Guards commanders of unilateral actions that have wrecked ceasefire prospects and pushed Iran toward disaster. Two sources close to the presidential office said a tense exchange took place on Saturday, April 4, between Pezeshkian and Hossein Taib. Hossein Taib, yeah, a powerful figure close to Supreme Leader Mojtaba Khamenei. Those present described the conversation as unusually difficult and highly charged. During the meeting, Pezeshkian accused IRGC Chief Commander Ahmad Vahidi and Ali Abdullahi, commander of Khatam al-Anbiya, such stupid words, Central Headquarters, the country's Armed Force Unified Command, of acting unilaterally and driving escalation through attacks on regional countries, especially against their infrastructure. So, the president of Iran, of the civilian government, is accusing the IRGC military commanders of acting unilaterally and all their attacks on the local Gulf neighbors. This is making things worse. According to the sources, Pezeshkian said those policies had destroyed any remaining chance of a ceasefire and were steering the Islamic Republic directly toward a huge catastrophe. He also warned that, based on what he described as precise assessments, Iran's economy would not be able to withstand a prolonged war for much longer, and that full economic collapse was inevitable under current conditions. The confrontation comes amid mounting evidence of a broader power shift inside the Islamic Republic, with military and intelligence networks increasingly displacing both the elected government and the traditional clerical order. What? So a London-based outlet is reporting, based on sources, that the IRGC is increasingly displacing both the civilian government and the clerics and the mullahs themselves. Ideological collapse in hidden state. A regional source familiar with internal developments told Iran International in February that the model of Vilayat Faqih, something like that, that's the guardianship of the jurist, that has defined the Islamic Republic for more than 4 decades, is now undergoing a fundamental transformation and even an ideological collapse. According to that source, the appointment of Mojtaba Khamenei to the leadership, despite lacking the traditional qualifications and legitimacy associated with the position, took place through an opaque process that in practice amounts to the sidelining of the traditional clergy and the consolidation of full control by the Guards' military intelligence apparatus. The source said this process has strengthened what many insiders describe as the Islamic Republic's hidden state. Iran International has previously reported growing tensions between Pezeshkian and senior IRGC commanders, particularly Vahidi, over how the war should be managed, and over its destructive impact on people's livelihoods and the economy. On March 28, informed sources said Pezeshkian had criticized the Guards' approach to escalating tensions and continuing attacks on neighboring countries, warning that without a ceasefire, the economy could collapse within 3 weeks to a month. I think it's difficult for a lot of people to understand the structure, the governing structure within Iran, because they have, like, baked into their very structure, they basically got 3 different sort of power centers, sometimes 2, but 3 really. You have the mullahs themselves, then you have the IRGC, then you have the civilian government. And the way that this article, published by a clear cutout for Western intelligence, Iran International, published out of London, this is obviously a cutout for Western intelligence. They're publishing an article basically saying the IRGC is like the deep state in Iran, that has sidelined the mullahs and the civilian government. This is very suspicious to me because I've pondered for a while. You know, when there's all the different like fake outs that you have, like an agent, and then you have a double agent, and then you have a triple agent, and then you can have like a double agent that's converted to a triple agent, or you can have an agent who's converted to a double agent. That's like, when you go through all these different layers, I've wondered for a while. This is entirely speculation, and there's so many issues that are like cut against it that this is purely a preliminary sort of theorizing, but I've wondered if perhaps it's actually the civilian government that is that is the British agents in here. And that the IRGC are actually much more of a mercenary sort of, but that perhaps the IRGC are actually the people that have been working with the Trump administration and speaking in rough terms. And they're pushing out all of these other factions because they're consolidating power under the IRGC to the exclusion of the civilian government. There's so many issues that would come up with that would be difficult to explain. But I'm trying to figure out why we're getting an article from a City of London cutout that is saying the IRGC are the big baddies here, and the poor civilian government. Are they burning the IRGC now? Is this an angle to burn the IRGC and to cast them aside? Yeah, Josh Hand, the military, aka the people who do the fighting, tend to be much more grounded in reality for obvious reasons. Right. That's what, has Trump flipped someone in the course of all of this? The Spider-Man meme, but all intelligence agencies. Yeah. I think there's also, in these sorts of times, allegiances can change pretty quickly. As facts on the ground change, allegiances can change as well. There's manila envelope quotients. There's, you might have some like second or third in command guy who's been sort of grinding and resentful underneath the structure, and suddenly he finds himself in a position of power, and he's like, you know what? I'm going to call up the Americans and make a deal. I don't know. I'm trying not to hold any of this too tightly because the psyops they're all flying fast and furious here. Subsequent reporting by Iran International showed that the president's authority has continued to shrink. Sources said the guards have resisted Pezeshkian's appointments and decisions, effectively stripped the government of executive control, and erected a security barrier around the core of power. According to those reports, Pezeshkian's attempts to appoint a new intelligence minister collapsed under direct pressure from Vahidi, who rejected all proposed candidates, including Hossein Dagon, and insisted that all key wartime positions must, for now, be chosen and managed directly by the guards. So IRGC leadership is saying all key wartime positions have to be chosen and managed directly by the guards. The president is being sidelined. His authority is getting reduced. And Trump is saying we have a new regime that has taken over that we think is more reasonable and that we can collaborate and work together with. So Trump is saying power has shifted to a new regime, and Iran International is saying the IRGC are crowding out the civilian government and the mullahs. So is there a psyop psyoping a psyop? What am I supposed to believe? Iran International also reported that Pezeshkian was forced under direct IRGC pressure to appoint Mohammad Bagher Zolgadar as Secretary of the Supreme National Security Council, despite his dissatisfaction with the choice. So it'll be interesting to see if this guy's name starts showing up in negotiations at all. Mohammad Bagher Zolgadar. A logistical crisis. Alongside the political infighting, fresh field reports received by Iran International point to a worsening human and logistical crisis inside the guards and the besieged. Sources said that over the past 72 hours, operational forces have faced acute shortages of basic supplies, including edible food, hygiene facilities, and places to sleep. Recent strikes on infrastructure and bases have left many guards and besieged personnel sleeping in the streets, and in some areas they've had access to only one meal a day. According to informed sources, some personnel were forced to buy food from shops and restaurants with their own money after expired rations were distributed. The rations are expired, and so they're like, oh, we can't eat them. We have to go buy our own stuff. Okay. At the same time, disruptions affecting bank SEPA's electronic systems have reportedly delayed the salaries and benefits of military personnel, fueling fresh anger and mistrust within the ranks. Iran International had previously reported similarly dire conditions in field units, including severe shortages of ammunition, water, and food, as well as growing desertions by exhausted soldiers. Even in the Guard's missile units, which have historically received priority treatment, sources reported serious communications failures and food shortages. They said commanders were continuing to send only technical components needed to keep missile systems operational, rather than food or basic individual supplies for personnel. Remember the whole list of things that Dan Kane, in the video I played at the beginning of the episode here, the list of things he said, all the military targets and stuff they've struck, all the damage, all the logistics, chains and stuff that they've attacked, all the production facilities and everything. I mean, it would stand to... This seems to map onto that pretty clearly. And they have their whole mosaic defense thing, which is if there's a big decapitation strike, you have these 31 different regions that are all become sort of semi-autonomous and they can run themselves. Well, if communications and financial networks are collapsing and falling apart, they're getting hit from all over the place, then that actually becomes it seems to me that it would be a lot easier to divide and conquer here. Once they're all split up and segregated, who knows who's saying what to whom? Everyone's getting more and more dissatisfied. Leadership keeps getting knocked off over and over again. What's being described here sounds exactly like what I would expect the situation on the ground to be, given what has been reported. Now, this is another interesting one from the earlier the same day. War reaches Iran's petrochemical heartland. Spear B says, and this makes sense why negotiations have never been able to happen. Right. And why they would be so chaotic and stop-start, and there's people who are sabotaging it. Because remember, the report was, there's this other insane list of 10 that was published by some local public access television from some Yahoo or whatever. And then CNN and the New York Times picked up on it and ran with it. So there's someone in this disconnected, sort of fragmented leadership situation, someone is firing off something to try to scuttle the negotiations that are happening through someone else. But for the economic situation on the ground, this is pretty explosive, pardon the pun. Iran's petrochemical sector is now openly under threat, marking a significant escalation in the conflict and raising the prospect of far-reaching economic consequences for the country and potentially the wider region. Israeli strikes in recent days have hit Iran's two main petrochemical hubs, Mashhad and Asaluya, while U.S. President Donald Trump has warned that further attacks on the country's energy infrastructure could follow if no deal is reached by Tuesday night. Again, this was Tuesday morning when this was published. Iranian authorities said Monday that industrial facilities in the Mashhad petrochemical zone are being evacuated ahead of Trump's deadline. On Saturday, April 4, Israeli forces targeted at least 8 major petrochemical complexes in the Mashhad region, along with the critical supporting infrastructure, including power plants that supply electricity to the industrial zone. 2 days later, similar strikes hit the vast petrochemical facilities at Asaluya, the center of Iran's South Pars gas and petrochemical operations. Although the full extent of the damage remains unclear, Iranian officials have acknowledged that operations in both regions have been halted. So they suppose Iranian officials could lie about this for whatever reason, but what they're reporting is that operations in both of those regions have been halted. That's significant. Mashhad accounts for approximately 28% of Iran's petrochemical production, while Asaluya contributes more than 48%. Together, the two hubs represent roughly 3/4 of the country's total petrochemical output. And operations in both regions have been halted. Iran's petrochemical industry is the second largest source of export revenue after crude oil. The country has a nominal production capacity of about 95 million tons per year, although actual output is closer to 75 million tons due to persistent shortages of electricity and natural gas. Around half of this production, valued at approximately $13 billion annually, is exported, accounting for more than 1/5 of Iran's non-oil exports. The shutdown of these facilities therefore represents more than a temporary industrial setback. It directly threatens one of Iran's most important sources of foreign currency earnings. If the damaged infrastructure cannot be restored in the medium term, the second largest producer of petrochemicals in the Middle East could even face shortages. Over the past decades, Iran has invested an estimated $70 billion in developing petrochemical infrastructure. In the event of severe damage, rebuilding these facilities would pose a major financial and technical challenge. Given the constraints imposed by sanctions, interesting thing that Trump's talking about relieving sanctions, limited access to international capital, and broader economic pressures, Iran is unlikely to have the resources required for rapid reconstruction. And Trump has said repeatedly that he doesn't want to destroy all of this stuff because he wants to make deals for rebuilding all of that infrastructure and integrating Iran into the polite society. Even if external financing were secured, restoring production capacity would take years and possibly more than a decade. Petrochemical plants are highly complex systems that depend not only on physical infrastructure, but also on stable energy supply, advanced technology, and efficient logistics networks, all of which are currently under strain in Iran. The strikes on petrochemical facilities come alongside recent attacks on major steel plants in Isfahan and Khuzestan, which together account for roughly half of Iran's steel output. Taken together, the pattern suggests a broader strategy aimed at weakening Iran's industrial backbone rather than targeting isolated sectors. The timing of these strikes is particularly significant given Iran's pre-existing structural weakness. In recent years, the country has faced chronic shortages of natural gas, electricity, and refined fuels, forcing many industries to operate well below capacity. These constraints have already reduced industrial output and increased production costs. So they're selling so much of their oil to China for like way under cost. And this is a very similar story to Venezuela. There were reports came out of Venezuela that a lot of their oil production was operating way below capacity, and it seems to be validated by the fact that their capacity has drastically increased since the yoinking. At the same time, now this is really important here. At the same time, Iran's logistics sector suffers from deep inefficiencies. According to World Bank data, the country ranks near the bottom in regional logistics performance, second only to Afghanistan. Only Afghanistan is worse in terms of regional logistics. This limits Iran's ability to reroute supply chains, manage disruptions, or quickly recover from large-scale damage to infrastructure. The combined effect of these factors could push Iran into a deeper economic crisis. Sustained disruption in petrochemical exports would significantly reduce foreign currency inflows, putting additional pressure on the national currency and exacerbating inflation. And I think that was... Yeah, so that was all on this article. Very, very prior is confirming that there's basically a split between the civilian government and the IRGC, and they're grappling for power and becoming increasingly fractured and uncoordinated. Now, this from Axios. Officials learned of an intriguing development Monday with Trump's deadline looming. Mojtaba Khamenei has instructed his negotiators, for the first time since the war began, to move towards a deal. The backstory behind the white-knuckle truce. So this was from yesterday morning. And again, right here, and the one I just finished, where was it? It was the thing it said about Khamenei. Oh, no, I can't find it now. Anyways. So officials in the U.S. and Israel learned of an intriguing development on Monday with President Trump's ultimatum looming. Supreme Leader Mojtaba Khamenei had instructed his negotiators for the first time since the war began to move towards a deal, according to an Israeli official, a regional official, and a third source with knowledge. So, an Israeli official, a regional official, so who knows where that regional official is from? Could be Could be Qatar, could be UAE, could be an American that's located there, could be a European, who knows? And a third source with knowledge. As Trump was publicly threatening total annihilation, there were signs of diplomatic momentum behind the scenes, though even sources close to Trump didn't know which outcome to expect right up until a ceasefire was announced. U.S. forces in the Middle East and officials in the Pentagon spent those closing hours preparing for a massive bombing campaign on Iranian infrastructure and trying to figure out where Trump was leaning. We had no idea what was going to happen. It was wild, the defense official said. Allies in the region were bracing for Iranian retaliation on an unprecedented scale. Inside Iran, some civilians were fleeing their homes in an attempt to avoid the brunt of the strikes. This account of the diplomacy that staved off that escalation for now is based on conversations with 11 sources with knowledge of the talks. On Monday morning, as Trump worked the crowd at a White House Easter celebration, a, quote, very angry Steve Witkoff was working the phones. The U.S. envoy told the mediators the 10-point counterproposal the U.S. had just received from Iran was, quote, a disaster, a catastrophe. If you can see so damn much of my ass, you asked with me. Anyways, that began a chaotic day of amendments, with the Pakistani mediators passing new drafts between Witkoff and Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, and the Egyptian and Turkish foreign ministers trying to help bridge gaps. So this sounds like this was that initial 10-point plan that they just threw in the trash. By Monday night, the mediators had U.S. approval for an updated proposal for a 2-week ceasefire. It was then up to Khamenei, whom the sources said was actively involved in the process on Monday and Tuesday, to make a decision. The intrigue, the involvement of the new supreme leader was necessarily clandestine and laborious. Facing an active threat of assassination by Israel, Khamenei has been communicating primarily via runners passing notes. Two sources described Khamenei's blessing for his negotiators to cut a deal as a breakthrough. The regional source said Araghchi also played a central role both in handling the negotiations and in pushing commanders from the Revolutionary Guards to accept a deal. So you have both, seems to be a division between Pezeshkian, the president, and the IRGC, and then you've also got the foreign minister here, who's framed as pushing the commanders to accept the deal. China was also advising Iran to seek an off-ramp. But at the end of the day, all major decisions on Monday and Tuesday went through Khamenei. Without his green light, there wouldn't have been a deal, the regional source said. It was clear by Tuesday morning that progress was being made, but that didn't stop Trump from making his most harrowing threat. A whole civilization will die tonight. Some U.S. media outlets reported Iran was breaking off talks in response. Sources involved in the negotiations told Axios that was not the case, and that there was actually some momentum. Vice President Vance was working the phones from Hungary, dealing primarily with the Pakistanis. Meanwhile, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was in frequent contact throughout the day with Trump and his team, though the Israelis were growing increasingly concerned that they'd lost control of the process. Fascinating. By around noon Eastern Time on Tuesday, there was a general understanding that the parties were converging on a 2-week ceasefire. 3 hours later, Pakistani Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif published the terms on X and called on both sides to accept. Trump immediately started getting calls and text messages from hawkish allies and confidants urging him to reject it. Such was the confusion around Trump's thinking, even among his close associates, that multiple people who had spoken with Trump only an hour or two earlier still believed he would spurn the ceasefire offer right up until he took it. Shortly before posting his response, Trump spoke to Netanyahu to get his commitment to adhere to the ceasefire. He next spoke to Pakistani Field Marshal Asim Munir to close the deal. U.S. forces got the order to stand down 15 minutes after Trump's post. And there were B-52s that were out humming. They were headed there, and I saw on the flight tracker, shout out to Superior B, was sending me stuff that showed them turning around. There's like a big U-turn in midair. Araghchi followed up, stating that Iran would adhere to the ceasefire and open the Strait of Hormuz to vessels operating, quote, in coordination with Iran's armed forces. It remains to be seen to what degree Iran will allow shipping to resume or how steadfast Netanyahu will be in his adherence to the ceasefire. A senior Israeli official told Axios that Netanyahu had received assurances the U.S. would insist on peace talks, that Iran give up its nuclear material, cease enrichment, and abandon its ballistic missile threat. Vance is likely to lead the U.S. delegation at talks planned for Friday in Pakistan, easily the most consequential assignment of his political career. There are still major gaps between the U.S. and Iranian visions for a deal, leaving the very real possibility the war will resume. Okay, so let me just give you guys this real quick. People are talking about having a hard time with Kick today. So if Kick is giving you too much grief and you're on Kick right now, there is the link to the stream on Rumble. Well Below Average says, I'm always wary of this will take years to fix claims. They said the oil fires in Kuwait would take decades to put out. They were out in less than a couple of months. Yeah, right. I mean, hypothetically, say there's some great peaceful resolution here between the U.S. and Iran, and it results in normalization of trade with Iran, and there's like a negotiated settlement where the United States is going to start like helping to finance development and reconstruction of all of this. Trump has said when he was asked about using the about Iran having a toll, because there's like these reports that Iran is collecting tolls now on ships that are going to pass through, and that they're collecting their tolls in Bitcoin. It's like $1 per barrel, so like a 2 million barrel. People have said $2 million. That $2 million comes from the $1 per barrel reports. And so if there's 2 million barrels on the tanker, then they would have it'd be a $2 million toll to go through. Trump said in response to that, he was like, well, we might have a joint toll with them. We might collect a toll as well. That might be part of what we agree to, which is, again, it's very close to sort of the direction that I've expected this to wind up going, that the United States and Iran settle on some sort of a joint partnership operation of the Strait. So this is a pretty big article here. Obviously, it's from Maggie Haberman at the New York Times. So it's Jonathan Swan and I report for our forthcoming book out June 23. So this is an excerpt from their book, How Trump Took the U.S. to War with Iran. Obviously, take it with a grain of salt, but there's a number of things that are included in here that leave me inclined to believe a decent amount of this is actually accurate. So in a series of Situation Room meetings, President Trump weighed his instincts against the deep concerns of his vice president and a pessimistic intelligence assessment. Here's the inside story of how he made the fateful decision. The black SUV carrying Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu arrived at the White House just before 11 a.m. on February 11th. The Israeli leader, who had been pressing for months for the United States to agree to a major assault on Iran, was whisked inside with little ceremony, out of view of reporters, primed for one of the most high-stakes moments in his long career. U.S. and Israeli officials gathered first in the cabinet room adjacent to the Oval Office. Then Mr. Netanyahu headed downstairs for the main event, a highly classified presentation on Iran for President Trump and his team in the White House Situation Room, which was rarely used for in-person meetings with foreign leaders. Mr. Trump sat down, but not in his usual position at the head of the room's mahogany conference table. Instead, the president took a seat on one side, facing the large screens mounted along the wall. Mr. Netanyahu sat on the other side, directly opposite the president. Appearing on the screen behind the prime minister was David Barnea, the director of Mossad, Israel's foreign intelligence agency, as well as Israeli military officials. Arrayed visually behind Mr. Netanyahu, they created the image of a wartime leader surrounded by his team. Susie Wiles, the White House chief of staff, sat in the far end of the table. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who doubled as the national security advisor, got a tickle in the back of my throat. Ugh. Kind of feels like I have a hair stuck in my tonsils or something. A little TMI there for you guys. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who doubled as the national security advisor, had taken his regular seat. War Secretary, Pete Hegseth and General Dan Kane, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, who generally sat together in such meetings, were on one side. Joining them was John Ratcliffe, the CIA director. Jared Kushner, the president's son-in-law, and Steve Witkoff, Mr. Trump's special envoy, who had been negotiating with the Iranians, rounded out the main group. The gathering had been kept deliberately small to guard against leaks. Other top cabinet secretaries had no idea it was happening. Also absent was the vice president. J.D. Vance was in Azerbaijan, and the meeting had been scheduled on such short notice that he was unable to make it back in time. The presentation that Mr. Netanyahu would make over the next hour would be pivotal in setting the United States and Israel on the path toward a major armed conflict in the middle of one of the world's most volatile regions. And it would lead to a series of discussions inside the White House over the following days and weeks, the details of which have not been previously reported, in which Mr. Trump weighed his options and the risks before giving the go-ahead to join Israel in attacking Iran. This account of how Mr. Trump took the United States into war is drawn from reporting for a forthcoming book, Regime Change Inside the Imperial Presidency of Donald Trump. The Imperial Presidency of Donald Trump. How did they do it? It reveals how the deliberations inside the administration highlighted the president's instincts, his inner circle's fractures, and the way he runs the White House. It draws on extensive interviews conducted on the condition of anonymity, yada, yada, yada. Okay. The reporting underscores how closely Mr. Trump's hawkish thinking aligned with Mr. Netanyahu's over many months, more so than even some of the president's key advisors recognized. Their close association has been an enduring feature across two administrations, and that dynamic, however fraught at times, has fueled intense criticism and suspicion on both the left and the right of American politics. And it shows how, in the end, even the more skeptical members of Mr. Trump's war cabinet, with the stark exception of Mr. Vance, the figure inside the White House most opposed to a full-scale war, deferred to the president's instincts, including his abundant confidence that the war would be quick and decisive. The White House declined to comment. In the Situation Room on February 11, Mr. Netanyahu made a hard sell, suggesting that Iran was ripe for regime change and expressing the belief that a joint U.S.-Israeli mission could finally bring an end to the Islamic Republic. At one point, the Israelis played for Mr. Trump a brief video that included a montage of potential new leaders who could take over the country if the hardline government fell. Among those featured, big revelation here, among those featured was Reza Pahlavi, the exiled son of Iran's last Shah, now a Washington-based dissident who had tried to position himself as a secular leader who could shepherd Iran toward a post-theocratic government. Basically confirmation that Pahlavi has just been a Netanyahu stooge, essentially, this entire time. So, interesting that Maria Machado in Venezuela had these well-documented connections to Netanyahu. Very clearly seemed like Netanyahu wanted her installed, and Trump did not do that. And Trump has basically categorically ruled out Pahlavi. He's been careful to not insult him, but he's been like, yeah, no, that's not happening. A little pattern I'm noticing here. Mr. Netanyahu and his team outlined conditions they portrayed as pointing to a near certain victory. Iran's ballistic missile program could be destroyed in a few weeks. The regime would be so weakened that it could not choke off the Strait of Hormuz, and the likelihood that Iran would land blows against U.S. interests in neighboring countries was assessed as minimal. Besides, Mossad's intelligence indicated that street protests inside Iran would begin again, and with the impetus of the Israeli spy agency helping to foment riots and rebellion, an intense bombing campaign could foster the conditions for the Iranian opposition to overthrow the regime. The Israelis also raised the prospect of Iranian Kurdish fighters crossing the border from Iraq to open a new ground front in the northwest, further stretching the regime's forces and accelerating its collapse. Interestingly, another thing that Trump actually explicitly said, no, this should not happen. Mr. Netanyahu delivered his presentation in a confident monotone. It seemed to land well with the most important person in the room, the American president. Sounds good to me, Mr. Trump told the Prime Minister. To Mr. Netanyahu, this signaled a likely green light for a joint U.S.-Israeli operation. Mr. Netanyahu was not the only one who came away from the meeting with the impression that Mr. Trump had all but made up his mind. The president's advisors could see that he had been deeply impressed by the promise of what Mr. Netanyahu's military and intelligence services could do, just as he had been when the two men spoke before the 12-day war with Iran in June. Earlier in his White House visit on February 11th, Mr. Netanyahu had tried to focus the minds of the Americans assembled in the cabinet room on the existential threat posed by Iran's 86-year-old supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. When others in the room asked the Prime Minister about possible risks in the operation, Mr. Netanyahu acknowledged these but made one central point. In his view, the risks of inaction were greater than the risks of action. He argued that the price of action would only grow if they delayed striking and allowed Iran more time to accelerate its missile production and create a shield of immunity around its nuclear program. Everyone in the room understood that Iran had the capacity to build up its missile and drone stockpiles at a far lower cost and much more quickly than the United States could build and supply the much more expensive interceptors to protect American interests and allies in the region. Mr. Netanyahu's presentations and Mr. Trump's positive response to them created an urgent task for the U.S. intelligence community. Overnight, analysts worked to assess the viability of what the Israeli team had told the president. So, if you only read that far, you might be like, oh, see? This is exactly what Joe Kent was talking about. Netanyahu came in and made a presentation to the president, and then they went to war, and he just got totally bamboozled. Well, let's keep reading. The results of the U.S. intelligence analysis were shared the following day, February 12, in another meeting for only American officials in the Situation Room. Before Mr. Trump arrived, 2 senior intelligence officials briefed the president's inner circle. The intelligence officials had deep expertise in U.S. military capabilities, and they knew the Iranian system and its players inside and out. They had broken down Mr. Netanyahu's presentation into 4 parts. First was decapitation, killing the Ayatollah. Second was crippling Iran's capacity to project power and threaten its neighbors. Third was a popular uprising inside Iran. And fourth was regime change, with a secular leader installed to govern the country. The U.S. officials assessed that the first 2 objectives were achievable with American intelligence and military power. They assessed that the third and fourth parts of Mr. Netanyahu's pitch, which included the possibility of the Kurds mounting a ground invasion of Iran, were detached from reality. When Mr. Trump joined the meeting, Mr. Ratcliffe briefed him on the assessment. The CIA director used one word to describe the Israeli prime minister's regime change scenarios: farcical. Now, interestingly, these 4 parts, decapitation, crippling Iran's capacity to project power and threaten its neighbors, those first 2 parts are like a core part of what Trump announced as their goals, what Rubio has announced as their goals. The third one there has been kind of referred to. Trump was like, you can take back your country, but he hasn't leaned into that too much. The fourth one, regime change, they have explicitly said multiple times, this is not one of our goals. And Ratcliffe, who many people have accused of being essentially an agent for Israel, his take on it was that the regime change scenarios are farcical. So you're telling me that Trump sought counsel from people other than the Israelis, and the counsel that he received was that, yeah, parts of what they're saying may work, but other parts of it are just out to lunch. And then what they proceeded to undertake left out the parts that his other counselors told him were farcical. This article's obviously written to try to stoke the dissatisfaction to try to tie Trump and Netanyahu together, to stoke the dissatisfaction among the right wing about Israel. That's clearly the reason why Maggie fucking Haberman is publishing this in the New York Times right now. And yet the article itself actually tells you the opposite. This article is completely detonating to Joe Kent's claims, to Tucker Carlson's claims. At that point, Mr. Rubio cut in, quote, "In other words, it's bullshit," he said. Okay, so CIA Director Ratcliffe says the Israeli proposition is farcical. Rubio says it's bullshit. Mr. Ratcliffe added that given the unpredictability of events in any conflict, regime change could happen, but it should not be considered an achievable objective. Interesting. Isn't that exactly what has been the position of the administration from the get-go? Several others jumped in, including Mr. Vance, just back from Azerbaijan, who also expressed strong skepticism about the prospect of regime change. The president then turned to General Kane. General, what do you think? Reminder, General Kane is the guy who took out ISIS. He had his plan. He went to Trump. He's like, everyone's saying this would take years. I could get it done in a few weeks. And Trump was like, all right, go for it. And then he did it. General Kane replied, quote, "Sir, this is, in my experience, standard operating procedure for the Israelis. They oversell, and their plans are not always well developed. They know they need us, and that's why they're hard selling." So everyone who has said, Trump doesn't know, I need to get a message to the White House to tell Trump The Israelis are lying to him. They're overselling. Literally the next day, he talked to his closest advisors, who all told him that. Trump doesn't know that Israel lies him into stuff. Every single one of his closest advisors is like, yeah, they're full of shit. In fact, not only are they full of shit, this is what they do. That's how this is characterized. The belief within the administration is this is how the Israelis conduct themselves. You, commenter on the internet, are not privy to some sort of special information about the state of Israel that you need to urgently get to Donald Trump because he's so dumb and gullible. Mr. Trump quickly weighed the assessment. Regime change, he said, would be, quote, their problem. It was unclear whether he was referring to the Israelis or the Iranian people. But the bottom line was that his decision on whether to go to war against Iran would not hinge on whether parts 3 and 4 of Mr. Netanyahu's presentation were achievable. Mr. Trump appeared to remain very interested in accomplishing parts 1 and 2, killing the Ayatollah and Iran's top leaders and dismantling the Iranian military. This is just absolutely devastating to the Tucker Carlson view of the world. And I love Tucker, but this has been agonizing to watch. This is a tale of events that explicitly repudiates it. Kate says, so what the fuck was the point of Joe Kent resigning the way he did? I've got to say I trust the people who vouched for him, but now I can't help but question some of that judgment. Right! Right, now he just looks like a retard. Like the premise of it was, oh, he's not aware of this other intelligence. He's being lied to. He's being told that they can accomplish things that they can't actually accomplish. But the things he actually wanted to accomplish were killing the Ayatollah and Iran's top leaders and dismantling the Iranian military. And what have they done? They have killed the Ayatollah and Iran's top leaders, and they are very well on the way to dismantling the Iranian military. And he didn't care about the rest of it. See, the problem with Joe Kent's story was, by his own admission, he was not involved in any of these meetings. So he wouldn't know what the president was and was not privy to. General Kane, the man Mr. Trump liked to refer to as Raisin Kane, had impressed the president years earlier by telling him the Islamic State could be defeated far more quickly than others had projected. Mr. Trump rewarded that confidence by elevating the general, who had been an Air Force fighter pilot, to be his top military advisor. General Kane was not a political loyalist, and he had serious concerns about a war with Iran. But he was very cautious in the way he presented his views to the president. As the small team of advisors who were looped into the plans deliberated over the following days, General Kane shared with Mr. Trump and others the alarming military assessment that a major campaign against Iran would drastically deplete stockpiles of American weaponry, including missile interceptors, whose supply had been strained after years of support for Ukraine and Israel. General Kane saw no clear path to quickly replenishing these stockpiles. Trump doesn't know! Trump doesn't know that we might run out of interceptors. Oh, wait. No, General Kane briefed him on that. Okay. So when he made the decision that he made it with that in mind. He also flagged the enormous difficulty of securing the Strait of Hormuz and the risks of Iran blocking it. Mr. Trump had dismissed that possibility on the assumption that the regime could capitulate before it came to that. The president appeared to think it would be a very quick war, an impression that had been reinforced by the tepid response to the U.S. bombing of Iran's nuclear facilities in June. General Kane's role in the lead-up to the war captured a classic tension between military council and presidential decision-making. So persistent was the chairman in not taking a stand, repeating that it was not his role to tell the president what to do, but rather to present options, along with potential risks and possible second and third order consequences, that he could appear to some of those listening to be arguing all sides of an issue simultaneously. He would constantly ask, and then what? I could not love General Kane more. My guy! And then what? This is, by the way, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, this is exactly what your responsibility is. Your responsibility is not to tell the president what to do. Your responsibility is to present options along with potential risks and externalities and stress test it. And then what? But Mr. Trump would often seem to hear only what he wanted to hear. General Kane differed in almost every way from a prior chairman, General Mark A. Milley, who had argued vociferously with Mr. Trump during his first administration and who saw his role as stopping the president from taking dangerous or reckless actions. Just straight up throwing General Milley under the bus. One person familiar with their interactions noted that Mr. Trump had a habit of confusing tactical advice from General Kane with strategic counsel. In practice, that meant the general might warn in one breath about the difficulties of one aspect of the operation, then in the next, note that the United States had an essentially unlimited supply of cheap precision-guided bombs and could strike Iran for weeks once it achieved air superiority. To the chairman, these were separate observations, but Mr. Trump appeared to think that the second most likely canceled out the first. They still want us to believe that Trump is just like a ADHD moron. Shallow, vapid. At no point during the deliberations did the chairman directly tell the president that war with Iran was a terrible idea, though some of General Kane's colleagues believed that was exactly what he thought. Trump the hawk. Distrusted as Mr. Netanyahu was by many of the president's advisors. Wait. Many of the president's advisors don't trust Netanyahu? I thought Trump was just surrounded and was like blocked off from any sort of counsel or advice and just surrounded by radical Zionists who are slavishly devoted to whatever Netanyahu tells them to think. The prime minister's view of the situation was far closer to Mr. Trump's opinion than the anti-interventionists on the Trump team or in the broader America First movement like to admit. This had been true for many years. Of all the foreign policy challenges Mr. Trump had confronted across two presidencies, Iran stood apart. He regarded it as a uniquely dangerous adversary and was willing to take great risks to hinder the regime's ability to wage war or to acquire a nuclear weapon. Furthermore, Mr. Netanyahu's pitch had dovetailed with Mr. Trump's desire to dismantle the Iranian theocracy, which had seized power in 1979 when Mr. Trump was 32. It had been a thorn in the side of the United States ever since. Now he could become the first president since the clerical leadership took over 47 years ago to pull off regime change in Iran. Usually unmentioned, but always in the background, was the added motivation that Iran had plotted to kill Mr. Trump as revenge over the assassination in January 2020 of General Qasem Soleimani, who was seen in the United States as a driving force behind an Iranian campaign of international terrorism. This is another thing. I've never seen anybody deny that this is true, that Iran had plotted to kill Trump. I've seen this reported by tons of people. There's no possible way that I'm ever going to know about it. I mean, I could confirm any of this one way or the other. And I don't at all think this is mutually exclusive from Israel plotting to kill him. And I absolutely do believe that there are people in Israel who have plotted to kill him. But those things being true about Israel does not somehow mean that Iran is suddenly just like not a problem or doesn't have to be considered or national security is just like where Iran is concerned, we just don't think about national security all. Back in office for a second term, Mr. Trump's confidence in the U.S. military's abilities had only grown. He was especially emboldened by the spectacular commando raid to capture the Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro from his compound on January 3rd. No American lives were lost in the operation, yet more evidence to the president of the unmatched prowess of U.S. forces. Within the cabinet, Mr. Hegseth was the biggest proponent of a military campaign against Iran. Totally unsurprisingly. The dude who has actually spent time in the great big sandbox, not surprised at all that he was the biggest proponent. Mr. Rubio indicated to colleagues that he was much more ambivalent. He did not believe the Iranians would agree to a negotiated deal, but his preference was to continue a campaign of maximum pressure rather than start a full-scale war. Mr. Rubio, however, did not try to talk Mr. Trump out of the operation, and after the war began, he delivered the administration's justification with full conviction. Rubio, the Zionist puppet. Ms. Wiles had concerns about what a new conflict overseas would entail, but she did not tend to weigh in hard on military matters in larger meetings. Rather, she encouraged advisors to share their views and concerns with the president in those settings. Ms. Wiles would exert influence on many other issues, but in the room with Mr. Trump and the generals, she sat back. Those close to her said she did not view it as her role to share her concerns with the president on a military decision in front of others. And she believed that the expertise of advisors like General Kane, Mr. Ratcliffe, and Mr. Rubio was more significant for the president to hear. Still, Ms. Wiles had told colleagues that she was worried about the United States being dragged into another war in the Middle East. An attack on Iran carried with it the potential to set off soaring gas prices months before midterm elections that could help decide whether the final 2 years of Mr. Trump's second term would be years of accomplishment or subpoenas from House Democrats. But in the end, Ms. Wiles was on board with the operation. Strange! Every single one of these people, who I have been reliably informed, was cordoning off the president and just subversively lying him in, convincing him to go pursue the Greater Israel Project, yada, yada, yada. Every single one of these people, apparently, from reports to the New York Times, are all skeptical about it. Actually, this New York Times piece is disinfo to make us believe that the admin isn't captured by Jews. Right. It's like the administration isn't captured by Jews, but like Trump is like obsessed with Netanyahu or something, even though he just blew off like the most important parts of it to Netanyahu. The second and third parts, the actual regime change, the total destruction of the Islamic State, that party's like, whatever. Vance the skeptic. Nobody in Mr. Trump's inner circle was more worried about the prospect of war with Iran, or did more to try to stop it, than the vice president. Mr. Vance had built his political career opposing precisely the kind of military adventurism that was now under serious consideration. He had described a war with Iran as, quote, a huge distraction of resources and, quote, massively expensive. He was not, however, a dove across the board. In January, when Mr. Trump publicly warned Iran to stop killing protesters and promised that help was on its way, Mr. Vance had privately encouraged the president to enforce his red line. But what the vice president pushed for was a limited punitive strike, something closer to the model of Mr. Trump's missile attack against Syria in 2017 over the use of chemical weapons against civilians. The vice president thought a regime change war with Iran would be a disaster. His preference was for no strikes at all, but knowing that Mr. Trump was likely to intervene in some fashion, he tried to steer toward more limited action. Later, when it seemed certain that the president was set on a large-scale campaign, Mr. Vance argued that he should do so with overwhelming force, in the hope of achieving his objectives quickly. In front of his colleagues, Mr. Vance warned Mr. Trump that a war against Iran could cause regional chaos and untold numbers of casualties. It could also break apart Mr. Trump's political coalition and would be seen as a betrayal by many voters who had bought into the promise of no new wars. Mr. Vance raised other concerns, too. As vice president, he was aware of the scope of America's munitions problem. A war against a regime with enormous will for survival could leave the United States in a far worse position to fight conflicts for some years. The vice president told associates that no amount of military insight could truly gauge what Iran would do in retaliation when survival of the regime was at stake. A war could easily go in unpredictable directions. Moreover, he thought there seemed to be little chance of building a peaceful Iran in the aftermath. Beyond all of this was perhaps the biggest risk of all. Iran held the advantage when it came to the Strait of Hormuz. If this narrow waterway carrying vast quantities of oil and natural gas was choked off, the domestic consequences in the United States would be severe, starting with higher gasoline prices. Tucker Carlson, the commentator who had emerged as another prominent skeptic of intervention on the right, had come to the Oval Office several times over the previous year to warn Mr. Trump that a war with Iran would destroy his presidency. A couple weeks before the war began, Mr. Trump, who had known Mr. Carlson for years, tried to reassure him over the phone. "I know you're worried about it, but it's going to be okay," the president said. Mr. Carlson asked him how he knew. "Because it always is," Mr. Trump replied. Look at my retard-maxing president. How do you know it's going to be okay? Because it always is. Don't worry about it. It's going to be okay. In the final days of February, the Americans and the Israelis discussed a piece of new intelligence that would significantly accelerate their timeline. The Ayatollah would be meeting above ground with other top officials of the regime in broad daylight and wide open for an air attack. It was a fleeting chance to strike at the heart of Iran's leadership, the kind of target that might not present itself again. Mr. Trump gave Iran another chance to come to a deal that would block its path to nuclear weapons. The diplomacy also gave the United States extra time to move military assets to the Middle East. The president had effectively made up his mind weeks earlier, several of his advisors said, but he had not yet decided exactly when. Now, Mr. Netanyahu urged him to move fast. That same week, Mr. Kushner and Mr. Witkoff called from Geneva after the latest talks with Iranian officials. Over 3 rounds of negotiations in Oman and Switzerland, the two had tested Iran's willingness to make a deal. At one point, they offered the Iranians free nuclear fuel for the life of their program. A test of whether Tehran's insistence on enrichment was truly about civilian energy or about preserving the ability to build a bomb. The Iranians rejected the offer, calling it an assault on their dignity. Mr. Kushner and Mr. Witkoff laid out the picture for the president. They could probably negotiate something, but it would take months, they said. If Mr. Trump was asking whether they could look him in the eye and tell them they could solve the problem, it was going to take a lot to get there, Mr. Kushner told him, because the Iranians were playing games. On Thursday, February 26th, around 5 p.m., a final Situation Room meeting got underway. By now, the positions of everyone in the room were clear. Everything had been discussed in previous meetings. Everyone knew everyone else's stance. The discussion would last about an hour and a half. Mr. Trump was in his usual place at the head of the table. To his right sat the vice president. Next to Mr. Vance was Ms. Wiles, then Mr. Ratcliffe, then the White House counsel David Warrington, then Stephen Chung, the White House communications director. The Gigacon! Across from Mr. Chung was Caroline Leavitt, the White House press secretary. To her right was General Kane, then Mr. Hegseth and Mr. Rubio. The war planning group had been kept so tight that the two key officials who would need to manage the largest supply disruption in the history of the global oil market, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and Energy Secretary Chris Wright, were excluded, as was Tulsi Gabbard, the Director of National Intelligence. The president opened the meeting asking, "Okay, what have we got?" Mr. Hegseth and Mr. Kane ran through the sequencing of the attacks. Then Mr. Trump said he wanted to go around the table and hear everyone's views. Mr. Vance, whose disagreement with the whole premise was well established, addressed the president. "You know I think this is a bad idea, but if you want to do it, I'll support you." Ms. Wiles told Mr. Trump that if he felt he needed to proceed for America's national security, then he should go ahead. Mr. Ratcliffe offered no opinion on whether to proceed, but he discussed the stunning new intelligence that the Iranian leadership was about to gather in the Ayatollah's compound in Tehran. The CIA director told the president that regime change was possible depending on how the term was defined. "If we just mean killing the supreme leader, we could probably do that," he said. This is interesting. I'd like to know what the stunning new intelligence that the Iranian leadership was about to gather. I'd like to know what that was. That'd be very interesting. When called on, Mr. Warrington, the White House counsel, said it was a legally permissible option in terms of how the plan had been conceived by U.S. officials and presented to the president. He did not offer a personal opinion, but when pressed by the president to provide one, he said that as a Marine veteran, he had known an American service member killed by Iran years earlier. This issue remained deeply personal. He told the president that if Israel intended to proceed regardless, the United States should do so as well. Mr. Chung laid out the likely public relations fallout. Mr. Trump had run for office opposed to further wars. People had not voted for conflict overseas. The plans ran contrary, too, to everything the administration had said after the bombing campaign against Iran in June. How would they explain away 8 months of insisting that Iranian nuclear facilities had been totally obliterated? Mr. Chung gave neither a yes or a no, but he said that whatever decision Mr. Trump made would be the right one. Ms. Leavitt told the president that this was his decision and that the press team would manage it as best as they could. Mr. Hegseth adopted a narrow position. They would have to take care of the Iranians eventually, so they might as well do it now. He offered technical assessments. They could run the campaign in a certain amount of time with a given level of forces. General Kane was sober, laying out the risks and what the campaign would mean for munitions depletion. He offered no opinion. His position was that if Mr. Trump ordered the operation, the military would execute. Both of the president's top military leaders previewed how the campaign would unfold and the U.S. capacity to degrade Iran's military capabilities. When it was his turn to speak, Mr. Rubio offered more clarity, telling the president, "If our goal is regime change or an uprising, we shouldn't do it. But if the goal is to destroy Iran's missile program, that's a goal we can achieve." Everyone deferred to the president's instincts. They had seen him make bold decisions, take on unfathomable risks, and somehow come out on top. No one would impede him now. I think we need to do it, the president told the room. He said they had to make sure Iran could not have a nuclear weapon, and they had to ensure that Iran could not just shoot missiles at Israel or throughout the region. General Kane told Mr. Trump that he had some time. He did not need to give the go-ahead until 4 p.m. the following day. Aboard Air Force One the next afternoon, 22 minutes before General Kane's deadline, Mr. Trump sent the following order. Operation Epic Fury is approved. No aborts. Good luck. Slutty Milk says, all of these people sound like level-headed people with various nuanced opinions, but that's just me. Crazy. Crazy to consider. Crazy to consider that possibility. Yeah, I've been repeatedly told, under, like, with no qualification whatsoever, that Trump is surrounded by subversive, evil Zionists who just tell him what he wants to hear, and they're lying him into this attack, and they've had no idea what to do. They had no plans. They didn't know what was going on. They've just been bumbling their way through. Had no clue that something could happen with the Strait of Hormuz. Yeah, I've been reliably informed that Trump has lost his mind and is Nero. Yeah, Tobias. And yet here we have this hostile presentation. Maggie Haberman hates Donald Trump. This is a hostile presentation of what happened there. Meanwhile, April 3 to 6 from Morning Consult on Trump approval. His approval rating bumped up from 43 to 45%, and his disapproval rating dropped from 54 to 52%. It's basically right in the same range that it's always been. This is Trump's highest net approval by Morning Consult since January 25. Approval ratings this time of year is meaningless. There's so much that's going to happen between now and elections. But Trump's approval is staying right in the same range that it's always been, despite the fact that there's this massively unpopular war. It's the end of the world. Total and complete apocalypse. Literally, Trump's only electoral vulnerability on this matter, the only vulnerability he has, is the people who are relentlessly insisting that he has an electoral vulnerability here. That's it. Generally speaking, the American population is kind of like, yeah, whatever. If we win, it's good. If we don't, oh well. This is going to be so far behind us by the time the midterms get here. People aren't even really going to be talking about it anymore. I mean, it'll be brought up the way that the Epstein thing is, but like nobody's talking about Epstein stuff except for the people who are just hysterical and looking for things to freak out about constantly. But apart from the people who've lost their minds, it's like, oh yeah, that Epstein thing that happened like last year sometime or something like that. Yeah, anyways. Now I've got a message for you guys. A special message from a special person. He would like you to know something very important. Mr. J.D. Vance from Budapest talking about blackpilling.
The piece of advice I'd give to you, and I give it to American students, American conservatives in particular, is resist the temptation to think that victory is immediate or that we're going to win back our civilization through instant gratification. I mean, this institution was founded in 1996. It's far more influential than it was back then, but I think a lot of people, this is particularly true in the United States of America, if they see something that the administration does they don't like, they say, oh, that's not what we voted for. We're going to check out of politics. No.
That's not what I voted for. Yes, Lady Milk. Bro's reading your tweets, Doomers. Your vice president is listening to you.
That's the exact wrong response. If we do something you don't like, the response should be to get more involved, to make your voice heard, and to try to push things in the direction that you want them to be pushed. Our civilization was not built overnight. It's not going to be saved overnight. And so what I'd encourage you to do is stay involved, be patient, and don't let disappointment turn to checking out of the system entirely. There's way too much of that, I would say, in the Anglo system and the American system. There's way too much, you know.
The Anglo system and the American system. What an interesting differentiation to make.
I didn't like this thing that the vice president said, or I didn't like this thing that the president did, and I'm going to completely check out. We call that blackpilling in the United States of America, and blackpilling is how you give power to the forces that are trying to destroy what our ancestors built.
Blackpilling is how you give power to the forces that are trying to destroy what our ancestors built. Directly from the mouth of the vice president. No fucking blackpilling. You could be dissatisfied. You could be unhappy. But there's this communist spirit, this revolutionary fervor that's emerging around the people who are the most upset about all of this are talking in ways that ought to be gigantic red flags. When you're starting to suggest things like we just need to like bypass the DOJ and Congress and the judiciary, they're all fucked. So we just need to start arresting people. When is Trump going to start arresting people and just stringing them up? What are you talking about? How is he going to, who is going to arrest them? How are they going to be arrested? Where are they going to be held? Who's being instructed? Who's being given these orders? How are these orders being enforced? I'm not saying no, give me your step-by-step plan here. You don't think there's a plan? What's your plan? Are we gonna? I was having this conversation with Cooper yesterday. By the way, Cooper is going to be making a return to the screen here before too long. So look forward to that. And I was like, "What is this like? Okay, we're gonna have like right-wing death squads directed by President Trump to go arrest Alan Dershowitz. We're just gonna like raid Alan Dershowitz and haul him off to like an abandoned warehouse or something. Now we're ISIS. We're gonna set up a camera, put Alan Dershowitz on it, and read a statement that you've been found guilty, and we're gonna saw Alan Dershowitz's head off and stream it live from the White House Twitter account. I don't want to live in that world. I don't want my son to live in that world. Last night, I had to talk Eastwood. I spent a while trying to talk Eastwood down, work through his fears so we could climb up into the attic and replace the filter in the HVAC system. In the morning, I went out and we went down to the little local park, and I was teaching him how to pull widowmakers out of the tree. Told him what widowmakers are and how to pull them out. Beautiful sunny day, having a great day with my son. Picked some flowers for his mom on the way home. He's riding his dirt bike. It's his little bike, but he calls it his dirt bike. He is obsessed with Artemis. He wants to know all the updates. He stops and he looks up at the moon when he can see it during the day, and he tries to see. He's like trying to see the astronauts. Where are they? Point them out to me, Daddy. He can't see them. It's too far away. And he just imagines that he can see him. He lives in a world of magic and possibility. He's fascinated by how everything works. He has so many things he wants to do. That life is not compatible with the extrajudicial right-wing death squads grabbing Epstein people or arresting members of Congress and standing up some sort of judge system and stringing him up or whatever. If you're being drawn by that, no, we just need to set up this parallel thing and just start murdering people. I don't care what motivations you think you're operating from. You're talking about the complete and total breakdown of civilized society. That is revolutionary communism. That's Bolshevism. I don't care about your particular political philosophies or like whatever's you're embodying the same spirit. That's what blackpilling leads to. Blackpilling leads to people desiring outcomes that will ruin opportunities for my son's future. And if you're one of those people, you are my enemy. You're perhaps a greater threat to my son's safety and potential future than the fucking Epstein clients or whatever. I don't care about some fucking old like billionaire perverts. I do care about the people who decide that we're just gonna build up an entire parallel pseudo-military thing and go start hanging people or whatever. That's not civilizational behavior. That's just anger and resentment. Just boiling over and lashing out. Completely destructive to your own souls. And totally at odds with the Spirit of Christ. You cannot claim to be a Christian and think that that's like some sort of viable path forward. That's what blackpilling leads to. And here's what J.D. Vance has to say to you.
This thing that the vice president said, or I didn't like this thing that the president did, and I'm going to completely check out. We call that blackpilling in the United States of America, and blackpilling is how you give power to the forces that are trying to destroy what our ancestors built. We need to take power.
The forces that will destroy what our ancestors built are not the shit libs. They're not the people trying to import millions of browns. Yes, those things could destroy what our ancestors built. But the surest, quickest way to destroy what our ancestors built is this attempt at like right-wing military revolution or whatever. Straight Buster says, if you want right-wing revolution, you want mountains of dead Christians. Exactly.
Or back from those people and build the kind of institutions that can actually save our societies. It will not happen overnight. It will not happen in the term of one prime minister or one president, but it will happen so long as we keep our faith in God and we work hard to achieve it. That's what we have to do.
Keep our faith in God and work hard to achieve it. Yeah, Lord Breezy, this is why the Doomers don't want you to marry and have kids. Yes. That's why there's such hostility toward wife guys. This is why they will counter-signal marriage. There's absolutely a horseshoe phenomenon here with the revolutionary commies and the vengeful son, resentful, quote-unquote, right-wingers who just want to see some sort of dramatic revolution. That someone else does it, by the way. It's not them. No. They're not going to be involved. They're just going to call for it. They're going to demand it. They're going to order other people to deliver this to them via DoorDash or something. This is just this. It's the exact same spirit that inhabited the Bolsheviks. I don't got time for it. Last thing. A glorious, glorious suggestion. This must happen. From Lance Corporate on X, a reality show where talk show hosts have to do what they're always telling other people to do. Dave Ramsey has 7 days to find a reliable $2,000 car for door dashing and a little old lady's $500 a month garage apartment to live in. Sean Ryan has to serve as an assistant U.S. attorney where he'd prosecute congressional corruption cases in federal court and have 12 months to secure a conviction. Imagine Sean Ryan having to be an AUSA who has to secure a conviction on a congressional corruption case in federal court in less than 12 months. Ben Shapiro and Mark Levin have to survive an entire 31st MEU CENTCOM deployment as E2s. Each its own season, all live streamed to X. Yes, this needs to happen. Someone get on it. Get these motherfuckers to put their money where their mouth is. Oh. All right. Well, that is all that I've got for today. Tomorrow, we are going to run out some interesting stuff. I've got a white paper from the White Papers Policy Institute, The Great Immigration Reversal, Trump's Real Progress in Tackling Legal Immigration. A great breakdown on everything that the administration has done thus far. There's also a great article or a great market report here from James Thorne, the guy that I read the thing about Machiavelli. He wrote a market report for his investor clients. April Market Insights, Bretton Woods 2.0, The New Great Game, and Trump. U.S. President Donald Trump's second term is not just another burst of tariff theater, it's the opening move in a new great game over energy, artificial intelligence, and money by neutralizing Iran and Venezuela, squeezing Cuba, binding Canada, and courting Russia. Washington is trying to re-anchor oil in U.S. dollars and push BRICS monetary ambitions to the margins. The petrodollar is dead. Long live the petrodollar. So we'll read that, and then there's some insights from the chairman and CEO letter to shareholders of Jamie Dimon. His letter to shareholders. Some interesting things in there. Shout out to Mr. Sue for getting this on my radar. So, yeah, that and probably some updates on whatever happens between now and 20 hours or so from now. So make sure you guys tune in tomorrow for the Friday Labe. And Tobias wants an Erica. Hang on, let me see if I can find one here. Let's see where. I can't get that there. Here, I'll play Sloshers from the beginning of the episode. An Erica to end it. Thank you guys for showing up and listening to the Labe. If you're a part of the replay gang, do me a favor and if you're listening on the podcast version, leave a 5-star rating and review. Share the show with someone. If you're on YouTube, like the episode. Leave me a comment. Let me know what you thought of it. And go follow me on X at KingPilled. Follow the KingPilled Telegram channel if you want alerts to know when we're going live. I don't use it very much, so I won't spam you. But that's a good way to know when we're going live. And go join the KingPilled Discord, kingpilled.com. We will be having the voice chat tomorrow evening. Friday evening, we will be voice chatting, discussing many of these things, I'm sure. So it's a very good time. You may not want to miss that. So I'll catch you guys on the Labe tomorrow. For now, I leave you with Hulk.
When they took a shot at my hero, and they tried to kill the next president of the United States, enough was enough. And I said, let Trumpomania run wild, brother. Let Trumpomania rule again. Let Trumpomania